This is a 2024 Ferrari 812 Competizione, and it's the high-performance version of the Ferrari 812 Superfast. Yes, that's right, there's a car called Superfast, and then this one is even faster. Pricing starts at $600,000, and under the hood is a big V12 with 820 horsepower. Today, I'm going to review the new 812 Competizione and show you all of its quirks and features. Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. So far, Cars and Bids has sold almost $500 million worth of cars, all sorts of special, interesting stuff like this, and this, and this, and this. So, if you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car, do it at carsandbids.com. All right, time for the quirks and features of the 812 Competizione, which, like I said, is the high-performance version of the 812 Superfast, which has been Ferrari's regular production flagship V12 model since 2018. This car has the same V12 as the regular Superfast, but with some tweaks to give it more power. The 812 has 790 horses, this is juiced up to 820, and it even has a 500 RPM higher redline, so it screams a bit more. Now, beyond the big power, the coolest thing about this engine is just looking at it. This big, massive V12 under the hood, it looks so cool and so special, particularly in the days of EVs and hybrids. Seeing a big old V12 is a rare sight. In fact, most people thought this car would be the very last V12 Ferrari, but they've recently announced they're going to replace it with another big, naturally aspirated V12. They're going to keep it going as long as they can, which, for most car enthusiasts, is just fine by us. But anyway, next up, onto the other upgrades over the standard 812 that make this car extra special. The most obvious you're looking at right now, there's no rear window. It's been removed on this car and replaced with a carbon fiber panel, very lightweight, that has on top of it all of these carbon fiber like blades, which Ferrari says help manage airflow around the car. That is probably the most distinctive exterior change for the 812 Competizione over the standard car, but there are a lot of other upgrades if you start to look closely. The other big one in back is definitely the rear diffuser, which is absolutely massive and tremendously aggressive. Almost looks race car-like just how huge it is, and you can see a lot of carbon fiber back there too. It makes for a very special and expensive rear diffuser. You also have this sort of hole in the rear bumper behind the rear wheel, probably also for aerodynamics. The standard 812 doesn't have that, but you get it on the Competizione, this car, and the rear spoiler is more aggressive. You don't really notice it because it's just bodywork, but it's larger and at a higher angle than in the standard 812, which is another distinguishing feature in the rear compared to the regular car. And then there's the exhaust. Instead of your usual oval-shaped quad exhaust like in the standard 812, you have this rectangular thing that's stuck into the diffuser. It looks cool, it looks race car, and of course, it sounds fantastic. Take a listen to a few revs. And the exterior changes over the standard 812 continue as we go down the car. On the side, the rocker panel is completely different on the competition model. This one, you can see it's all carbon fiber and it's sculpted to flare out at the end, which obviously has an aerodynamic effect, probably works with the stuff in the back. This piece right here, this hole behind the wheels, is completely different in the comp than it is in the regular 812 Superfast. It's totally redesigned, it's shaped differently, and it looks more aggressive and exciting. Another major change on this car compared to the standard 812 comes on the hood, where you can see this carbon fiber panel basically stretches from one side all the way to the other, from driver's side fender to passenger side across the entire hood. The regular 812 doesn't have that, the Comp does, and that's another easy way to distinguish this car if you see one on the street, just like the no rear window. And another big change up front, the whole front splitter situation is a lot more aggressive. Once again, just like the rear diffuser, you can see sculpted for aerodynamic prowess, very aggressive, very track car-like, and again, a lot of carbon fiber. You don't want to scrape this piece, which is going to be a challenge considering where it is on the car. Now, taken as a whole, the changes to the Competizione are relatively subtle compared to the standard 812. Most regular people probably won't see anything other than, ooh, cool Ferrari. They won't know this is the crazy one that starts at 600 grand. But car people will instantly pick up on all of these upgrades and know that this is the special 812. And special it is. Ferrari says they're only making 999 coupes and 599 812 Competizione A models. A stands for aperta, which means open. That's the convertible. So limited production and extra power and other upgrades. And next we move inside the 812 Comp, where just like on the outside, there are quite a few changes compared to the regular 812. Now, I'm going to mostly focus on those changes because I've already reviewed a regular 812 Superfast and the convertible model, the GTS. I'll link those reviews in the description below for a thorough tour. Here, let's talk about the upgrades, starting with, well, there's no rear window, like I mentioned, and that is extremely clear when you climb inside the car and see, well, nothing behind you, just darkness. You do have a little shelf there for storage, but you're not looking out the back of this car. Thankfully, Ferrari figured out a way to preserve your rear visibility with a rear view mirror camera. You can see right now it's a mirror, but you flip the switch and it becomes a camera, and suddenly you can see everything that's behind you that you can't normally see because there's no rear window. So that's a big difference over the regular 812, and there's a lot of other stuff too. The seats are a major one. You can see carbon fiber sport bucket seats. They're pretty tight. They're designed to keep you in place on the racetrack, and they're fully trimmed in Alcantara, which also helps with that. It's not a smooth material, so you won't be sliding around in hard cornering. These seats are also fully adjustable with bars and levers instead of power seats like you'd find in a regular 812. They do that in order to save weight. And in fact, they've done that all throughout this car. You can see the usual luxury trimmings are completely gone, replaced with weight-saving, high-performance material, mostly Alcantara. The entire top of the dashboard is completely finished in Alcantara, as you can see. With this nice stitching, it looks great. You also have the headliner totally finished in Alcantara, even the sun visors, all Alcantara in this car, and that continues over to the door panel as well. No leather in here, just Alcantara, and this substance, which I'm going to call sport cloth. Not sure what the correct term is, but it also takes the place of some leather, and you see it in a lot of places. The glove boxes you're seeing now, but also the floor mats are completely made out of this substance, and a big part of the center console is all this sort of sport cloth material, which I'm sure saves weight, and frankly, it looks right at home in this high-performance track-focused car. Same deal with the carbon fiber. You can see the rest of the center console is mainly made of carbon fiber, which certainly fits, and same deal with the door panel. A lot of carbon fiber there to add to the sporty nature of this car. Now, beyond all that stuff, some other general items worth discussing in this interior. Having a naturally aspirated big old V12 is very cool, but in this case, it also comes with some technology that feels old. Specifically, the screen situation in the gauge cluster. You have a fixed gauge in the middle, which Ferrari got rid of several years ago in their other models, and two different screens on the side, which are controllable by these switch panels, buttons and switches. One to the right of the steering wheel for the right screen, and one to the left of the steering wheel for the left screen. And frankly, they're just kind of difficult to use. The controls are a little bit obscure and cryptic, and it's rather odd to dial one thing and then press buttons and you're not sure what does what, and the two sides are actually quite different in their controls. Newer Ferrari models have it all on the steering wheel, adjusting the gauge cluster Selector screen, which frankly makes it a lot easier. And it's the same deal with the climate controls in this car. You can see the adjustability is done with these buttons, which once again, there's a lot of them and they're a little cryptic. There's a lot of different arrows and things you can turn on and control. Modern Ferrari models make it a lot easier to adjust the climate, but this car, well, frankly, it feels like the last generation, the previous model Ferraris, which is exactly what it is. This is the oldest model in Ferrari's lineup, and in this interior it shows. It's not terrible, nothing too bad here, but you can definitely tell the tech is starting to feel old. With that said, two lovely benefits of this car. For one, turning it on is done with a bright red start-stop button, which is pretty cool. And that's different from newer Ferrari models where you press a screen and that turns it on. It's cool to have the old school button. Also worth pointing out, in the center you have these controls for the transmission, which are intended to mimic the look of an old school gated manual transmission that old Ferrari models had. You can see these switches turn on reverse. They switch between A for automatic and M for manual shift mode. And then PS stands for power start, which is Ferrari's version of launch control. But the really cool thing is just the way this looks like an old gated manual. They've gone retro with their transmission control buttons, and I love it. Also worth pointing out, one other item I like inside this interior, the vents, the climate vents, which are right here. Very reminiscent of a jet turbine or maybe a car exhaust, but either way they look very cool and they feel cool to turn and move. They have just the right amount of rotational feedback, and it's really a pretty perfect thing both in look and feel. And next up we move on to the cargo area in the 812 Comp, although first I want to say one more thing about this big carbon fiber panel that replaces the rear window. It comes with one big drawback. This thing. This is a big hump that contains the camera that feeds to that rear view mirror display I just showed you. In order to not have a window, you got to put that camera somewhere, and it's right in the middle and kind of unsightly. It doesn't look great sticking up right there. But anyway, next we move on to the cargo area. You open it up on the key fob, get back here, and you can see it's actually reasonably practical, and there are some rather interesting quirks to this cargo area. One is that it opens to the entire car. So you have a separate cargo area, but then also you can access that rear shelf behind the seats and the rest of the interior if there's some large item that needs to be placed back there. Although it's worth pointing out there is a partition between them that's fixed in place. So you can't remove it or fold it down in order to get like skis into your 812 Comp. That's not gonna work. Now, mounted on this partition in the cargo area, you can see a plaque that shows this car's full list of options. All of the options and features that came with it from Ferrari. They add this into a lot of their models, maybe all now, and it's pretty cool to see what it was originally ordered with. My very favorite option for this car, the owner told me it was ordered with Pirelli Color Edition tires. And what that means is this yellow stripe that goes around the tire on the outside, that was the option, a stripe on the tire, which is a wear item. You're gonna go through it and then have to replace the tires. But originally it had the yellow stripe, and the owner told me it was a $4,300 option to get that stripe on the tire. That's big money, but it does look kind of cool. And two other cool things in this cargo area, interesting quirks. One is the latch you pull to get out, the emergency trunk release if you've been kidnapped in an 812 Comp. You can see it here, and it shows a person getting out of a 550 Maranello, a true old school Ferrari. I guess they've been using this latch since the time of that car. They never changed the graphic, and that is a pretty cool little touch when you notice it. The other interesting thing, when you lift up the floor in the cargo area, you can see there's a little loop for that. You lift it up, and that's where they've put the tool kit, which for this car is actually surprisingly comprehensive. A lot of special tools and even fuses that go along with the car if you need to do some roadside work. Interestingly, one tool is missing, but don't worry, there's a warning label here that specifically says that this tool is not necessary for this car. So it's not that it's missing, it was never included, you don't need it, you you don't have to worry about the toolkit being incomplete in 25 years when this car comes up for auction for millions of dollars. But anyway, those are your interesting quirks and features of the 812 Competizione. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the 812 Competizione. I've driven the 812 Superfast and the 812 GTS, so I have a pretty good idea about how this car is going to drive, but it's a special car, and it drives specially. First thing, you get it in, you sit down in this tight sport bucket, carbon fiber sport bucket seat, and it's pretty harsh. The ride's pretty harsh. I mean, you get in and you know you're in a pretty serious car. You're in a Ferrari, but you're not just in a Ferrari. You're in something real. Shifts are amazing. This car has a dual clutch transmission, and it's really quick to shift. Really moves you along, which is pretty nice. And it gives you just the right amount of like feel of a shift. So it doesn't just feel like it's totally automatically quickly making the shift and nothing's happening. You feel it a little bit, which is kind of nice. All right, let's step on it a little. Oh, whoa. Oh, so fast. God, it's so fast. This car can this powertrain is so good, and it is so fast. This engine is really one of the all-time great V12 engines. It's just immediately responsive to even the smallest amount of throttle input. You know, I've seen complaints actually that this car is too fast, and I get it, but the nice thing about this powertrain is you totally have the ability to moderate your decision on speed, because you can go 1/4 throttle and actually have a pretty fast driving experience, or you can go all the way and kind of terrify yourself and everybody else. Now I'm here, stopped at a stoplight, and auto start stop is on, so it's completely silent. The engine has turned itself off. It's crazy to imagine in a Ferrari that's the situation, but it is indeed. So no V12 sound right now, but then the moment you get off the brake to start going again, it returns. This is just such a fast and impressive car. Now, it is a harsh car. It's not quite as harsh as I was expecting it would be. I feel like the 430 Scuderia was like a pinnacle of insanity and harshness, and to an extent the 360 Challenge Stradale. And someone told Ferrari, hey, you know, it's probably a little too much for like rich guys and road cars. And so Ferrari kind of toned it down a little bit after those cars. But you still get a very harsh driving experience. I mean, it is rough in here. You feel bumps, the suspension. You're sitting on a very tight, you know, sport bucket carbon fiber seat. It's a pretty serious thing. And it's just such a responsive powertrain, and it's so loud, and it sounds so good. And it's just so ready to get going. It's like, please, I know you want to do something, let's do it. There really is a lot to love about this car, although I'm driving it around sort of in a city area, you know, its talents are wasted here. And frankly, it doesn't feel dramatically different from a regular 812 in this setting, with the exception that it's definitely harsher and it's definitely a little bit louder. But generally speaking, I would say it's not dramatically different instantly. You don't necessarily notice that right away unless you really start getting after it. And then I could see you understanding, but you wouldn't be able to do that in this type of driving situation, frankly. Oh, man, this car is just really impressive. This powertrain is so good. It still feels just like such a special occasion driving a car like this in today's world where it's so rare to be able to have the opportunity. I think overall this is a really impressive car. Is it worth that much more than an 812 Superfast? I think for the vast majority of drivers, the answer is probably going to be no. I mean, just cruising around in sort of a normal, you know, area, I don't really notice a great amount of difference. I think you'd have to be pretty skillful and in a pretty high, serious, competitive driving situation to understand. But if you want to drive a more special car, a more hard-edged, you know, ultimate, if you're going to get a Ferrari, you're going to go all the way, this is the car that certainly goes all the way. And it is a pretty impressive driving experience. Just the 812 in general and this fantastic V12. Steering, handling, everything about this car is just really on point. Even if the interior is starting to feel a little old school, that's the price you pay for the old school feel of one of the great powertrains. And so that's the new 2024 Ferrari 812 Competizione, one of the ultimate modern high-performance Ferrari models. It has everything you'd expect from a Ferrari: massive power, massive performance, and a massive price tag. And now it's time to give the 812 Comp a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 71 out of 100, which puts the 812 Competizione here against rivals. It actually earns the very same score as the other 812 models despite all of its upgrades. It adds a point in the weekend categories for cool factor, but it loses a point for comfort over the standard 812, which keeps the overall score identical. Truthfully, that makes sense, as the regular 812 is a total monster of a car, an absolutely amazing spectacle of performance and capability, and the Competizione's upgrades are really only incremental, though its limited production means it'll be a highly desirable long-term collector's item in a way the standard 812 never will.